If anyone asks, tell them I was with you. Rima said it the way she always did, light, already moving on to the next sentence, like she was asking me to hold her coat for a minute. We were standing on the platform at Rawal Town Station, the 640 pulling in behind her. And she had one hand on the strap of her bag and was already moving toward the opposite exit. I said, "Okay." I always said okay. I want to tell you that something in me flinched. That I felt it, some old alarm going off quietly under the noise of the platform. But the truth is I didn't. I nodded, she smiled, the train doors opened, and that was that. It was such a small thing. A missed hour at a family lunch. A little cover story so her mother-in-law wouldn't ask where she'd really been. It was only later, 3 weeks later, in a different kitchen, with a different friend, over a conversation I wasn't even trying to have, that I understood what that sentence actually was. Not a favor. A pattern. One I'd been part of for most of our lives without ever counting it. This is the story of the year I finally started counting. I've known Rima since we were 9 years old, since the second week of 4th grade, when she sat next to me because the teacher put her there, and stayed next to me because, as she told it later, I was the only girl in class who didn't ask her a single nosy question. That was 25 years ago. I was the quiet one then. I'm still the quiet one now. We built our friendship on a kind of division of labor. She made the plans. I showed up. She talked. I listened. She got into trouble. Small trouble, the everyday kind. A forgotten commitment, an overspent budget, a fib to her husband about where an evening went. And I was the soft place that trouble landed. Not because I lied for her constantly. Most weeks, most months, there was nothing to cover. We were just two women who'd grown up together, who knew each other's mother's phone numbers by heart, who still called each other at 11 at night to complain about nothing. But every so often, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, there was a moment like the one on the platform. A little request. A little softening of the truth. I liked being needed that way. I liked being the friend who never made things harder. I mistook being useful for being important. I think a lot of people do. 3 weeks after the station, I was at Sana's place. Another friend from our old neighborhood, the kind you see every couple of months and pick up with instantly. We were drinking chai from her mother's old steel cups, the ones with the dented handles she keeps meaning to replace, and talking about nothing. Her renovation, her son's exam results, and somewhere in there she mentioned, almost as an aside, that Rima had called her back in March asking her to say, if it ever came up, that the two of them had gone to a cousin's engagement together. She does that, I said. She asked me something similar a few weeks ago. Sana looked at me a beat too long. She's asked me that before too. Not just in March, maybe 3 times? Over the years? She moved on to talk about her son's tuition fees 30 seconds later. But something in me had gone very quiet. 3 times with Sana, at least twice with me that I could count without trying. And I hadn't even started trying yet. I drove home telling myself 4 different stories about why it didn't mean anything. Rima's husband is strict about her time. Of course she manages it carefully. This isn't lying, it's just privacy. I believed those stories for about a week. Then I had lunch with my cousin Alina, who'd known Rima since childhood too. We were talking about a wedding we'd both attended the year before. Usman's wedding. The big one in the banquet hall by the canal. And I mentioned a detail from the evening. Something about the music, the time we'd left. Alina said casually, "You weren't there for that part, though. You left early with Rima, remember? She said you both had somewhere to be." I hadn't left early. I'd stayed until midnight. I remembered it clearly because I'd helped Alina's mother carry the dessert trays to the car afterward. And she'd pressed a box of leftover gulab jamun into my hands and told me I looked too thin. I didn't correct Alina. I just sat there, holding my glass of water, realizing that Rima had told her a version of that evening that included me leaving with her. A version I'd never agreed to, never been told about, and that had quietly become someone else's memory of a night I'd actually lived through differently. This wasn't Rima asking for cover. This was Rima writing me into stories without permission. After that, I stopped looking away. Over the following weeks, in ordinary conversations I would have once let pass, I noticed how often Rima's version of events depended on someone else's silence, and how often my name appeared in stories I'd never been part of. And then her husband called me. His name is Faisal. In 25 years of friendship with his wife, I could count on one hand the number of times he'd called me directly. He sounded relaxed, friendly even, and he asked me, as though it were the most natural question in the world, whether Rima had left her reading glasses at my place. "She thinks she left them the Saturday she was over," he said. "When you two were doing your tax paperwork together. I had not seen Rima that Saturday. We had not done any tax paperwork together." I had absolutely no idea what he was talking about. The silence lasted maybe 2 seconds. I heard myself say, "Let me check and get back to you." I said it smoothly, naturally, the way I'd apparently been trained to say things like that for 25 years. He thanked me. We hung up. I put my phone down on the kitchen counter and pressed both hands flat against the surface, the way you steady yourself when the floor shifts. I had not lied exactly. I had done something more familiar. I had created enough silence for her lie to survive. "Let me check" is not a false statement. But it is not the truth either. It is the careful, empty space where someone else's lie can keep breathing. And I had produced it automatically, my mouth moving before my conscience could catch up. 25 years of saying okay had turned into a reflex I couldn't override even when I wanted to. That scared me more than any of Rima's small lies ever had. I texted her that evening. "Your husband just called me about reading glasses." "I don't know what Saturday he's talking about," she replied 20 minutes later. "Oh God, sorry, I'll handle it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it." Not an explanation of where she'd actually been. Not an apology for putting me in front of her husband without warning. A red heart emoji and the assumption that I'd move on. The way I always moved on. For the first time in 25 years, I didn't reply. The weekend request came less than 2 weeks after Faisal's phone call. Rima called instead of texting, usually a sign that whatever she wanted felt slightly bigger than usual, even to her. "I need a favor," she said. "It's small." I was standing at my kitchen counter, peeling garlic for a dinner I'd end up not finishing. My hands stopped moving. She explained. Her husband's cousin was getting married the following weekend. Out of the city, and she didn't want to go. There was history there. An old family disagreement she didn't want to reopen, and she'd rather spend the weekend with a friend from her college years who was visiting from abroad. Someone Faisal had never approved of. Someone he didn't know she still saw. She wanted to tell him she was with me instead. A weekend trip, something ordinary, something he wouldn't question. "You wouldn't even have to do anything," she said. "Just if he asks you directly, which he probably won't, just say we were together." 2 weeks earlier, that same husband had called me about a Saturday I knew nothing about, and I had covered for her without thinking. Now she was asking me to do it again, deliberately this time for an entire weekend, with a full invented itinerary attached to my name. I wonder sometimes if she thought about that phone call at all before making this request, if she waited and decided I'd gotten over it, or if it simply hadn't registered as something I'd need to get over. I still don't know which possibility is worse. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I said I needed to think about it, and I heard the surprise in her silence, a half second too long before she said, "Sure, of course, whenever." I hung up and sat in my kitchen for a long time. The chair across from me was empty. Rima used to sit there, back when we lived closer, back before either of us was married, back when neither of our lives required this kind of careful architecture. I looked at that empty chair the way you look at a photograph of someone at an age they no longer are. That night, lying in bed with the ceiling fan ticking above me, I almost called her back to say yes. I picked up my phone twice. The first time I put it down because I couldn't find the words. The second time I put it down because I'd found them, and they were the wrong ones. "Sure, no problem." "It's fine." and I recognized them as the same words I'd been saying for 25 years. And I understood finally that they had never once been true. If I said yes, I would be doing what I'd always done, protecting a 25-year friendship, keeping the peace. And she had been there for me, genuinely, in ways that mattered. She sat with me through the worst 3 months of my divorce, when I couldn't sleep and called her at 2 a.m, and she never once told me to call back at a reasonable hour. She drove my father to his appointments the year he was sick, and I couldn't take time off work. She helped me move when no one else showed up. Those weren't small things, and I never forgot them, and they made this decision feel like a betrayal even as I was making it. If I said no, I would be making a judgment about her marriage from a position I'd never occupied, and risking the one friendship that had outlasted everything else in my adult life. But underneath both options was a third thing I couldn't stop hearing. If I said yes again, after Faisal's call, after the wedding I didn't leave, after Sana, I was confirming to myself that I would keep doing this indefinitely, that there was no version of the request large enough to make me stop. And that if Faisal ever found out about any of it, he wouldn't just feel lied to by his wife. He'd feel lied to by me, because I had already helped the lie survive. Without choosing to. I didn't sleep much that night, or the night after. I called her back 2 days later. I'd written down what I wanted to say, not because I didn't know what I felt, but because I didn't trust myself not to fold the moment I heard her voice. I'd folded every time before. 25 years of folding. I can't do the weekend thing, I said. She laughed, a short, confused sound. What do you mean, can't? It's not a big deal, Mira. It's literally just, I know what it is. That's why I can't. The line went quiet. I don't want to be the person Faisal calls when he has a question about a Saturday I was never part of, I said. That already happened. 2 weeks ago. You know it happened. That was one time, she said, and her voice was careful now, measured, the way it got when she was deciding how much to give. I told you I was sorry about that. You told me not to worry about it. That's not the same thing. I could hear her breathing, deliberate and slow, the way she breathed when she was trying not to say something sharp. So what is this actually about, Mira? Because it's clearly not about one weekend. My hands were shaking. I looked down at the piece of paper I'd written my notes on. The handwriting was steady. The woman holding the paper wasn't. Alina thinks I left Usman's wedding early with you last year, I said. I didn't. I was there until midnight. I helped her mother carry the dessert trays to the car. But you told Alina I left with you, and now that's what she remembers about that night. Silence. Sana's covered for you 3 times that she can count. I've done it at least that many. And none of us ever compared notes until a few weeks ago. So you've been, what? Investigating me? Talking to people behind my back? I've been paying attention? Those are different things. It sounds like the same thing from where I'm sitting. She was quiet for long enough that I thought she might hang up. I could hear something in the background, a door closing maybe, or a window. When she spoke again, her voice was different, smaller, less defended. And for the first time in this conversation, not performing. You don't understand what it's like, she said. Living in that house, having to account for every hour, every purchase, every friendship he doesn't approve of. You've never had someone track your time like a budget sheet. You got out of your marriage. I'm still in mine. She was right. I hadn't lived her life. I didn't know what it felt like to navigate a husband who monitored her movements, who controlled the household money, who had opinions about which friends she was allowed to keep. I felt the weight of that, the genuine unfairness of judging someone's survival strategy from the outside, from the clean comfort of my own small apartment where no one asked me where I'd been. For a moment, I almost took it all back. Are you afraid of him? I asked. She didn't answer immediately. The silence had a texture to it. Not shock, not offense, something more careful than either. If you ever need somewhere safe to go, call me, I said. I mean that. Anytime, day or night, but I can't keep being a place you pretend you were. I believe it's hard, I said. And I don't think you're a bad person for managing it the way you do. But you used my name with Faisal without telling me. You put words in Alina's memory about a night I was actually at. The small stuff. The lunches, the hours, the little stories. I could have said no to those, and I didn't. And that's on me. But somewhere along the way you stopped asking. Rima, you just started using my name whenever it was convenient. And I think you assumed I'd never notice because I never had before. I didn't think you'd mind, she said. And the worst part, the part that kept me up for weeks afterward, was that I believed she meant it. She genuinely believed I wouldn't mind, because I never had, because I'd spent 25 years being the woman who never minded anything. I know, I said. I know you didn't think I'd mind. That might be the part that hurts the most. There was a long pause. I could hear her swallow. So what do you want me to say? She asked. That I'm sorry? I'm sorry. That I won't do it again? Fine, I won't do it again. Is that enough? Can we move past this now? I don't know, I said. And I meant it. I genuinely didn't know if we could move past it. Because moving past it meant going back to what we were. And what we were was a friendship where my name was available for whatever story she needed to tell. She went quiet in a way I recognized, and it felt, in that moment, as if she no longer considered me safe. I could almost hear it. A door that doesn't slam but clicks shut. Okay, she said. Fine, I'll figure something else out. Rima. No, you've said what you needed to say. I heard you. She hung up. I sat there with my phone in my hand and the piece of paper still on my lap, my careful notes already useless. I'd said what I meant, every word of it, and none of it, not one sentence, had felt like enough. I'd expected to feel lighter. I didn't. I felt like I'd pulled a thread that had been holding something together for 25 years, and now I was sitting in the middle of whatever was left. We didn't speak for 11 days. Then a small, careful text from her, a photo of something unrelated, a joke about a mutual friend's new haircut. Nothing about the weekend. Nothing about the phone call. I answered in kind. We slid back into something that looked from the outside exactly like our old rhythm, but it wasn't the same. She stopped calling to ask me for anything, not just alibis, everything. She didn't ask me to pick her up from the airport that spring, something I would have done without a second thought a year earlier. She started making plans that didn't include me as automatically as they used to. I noticed the space widening between us the way you notice a tide going out, not in one visible movement, but in 100 small ones, none of which you can point to and call the cause. We were both at a mutual friend's daughter's birthday party that June, the first time we'd been in the same room since the phone call. She smiled at me across the table, and I smiled back, and we talked about nothing for 10 minutes the way two women do when they're performing friendship for an audience. She laughed at something I said, and I caught myself wondering if the laugh was real. And then I caught myself wondering when I'd started questioning her laughs, and I hated that. I hated that the counting had turned me into someone who couldn't just sit in a room with her oldest friend without auditing every reaction. I made her coffee the last time she came over, months later, a visit that felt more like a courtesy call than a friendship. And I caught myself filling her cup slightly fuller than mine, the way I'd done since we were children, when she used to complain I never gave her enough. The gesture was so automatic I didn't realize I was doing it until I set the cup down and saw that she hadn't noticed either. We'd both stopped noticing. That might have been the saddest part of the whole story, not the argument, not the silence, but the old kindness still running on its own like a clock no one remembers to wind. Something else happened in those months that I hadn't expected, and it's the part of this story that cost me the most. I started replaying old moments from our friendship, and I couldn't always tell anymore which version I was remembering, the one that actually happened, or the one Rima had told people happened, or the one I'd told someone else on her behalf. I'd repeat a story about us at a family function, and halfway through I'd stop, suddenly uncertain. Is this what I remember, or is this what she asked me to remember? After 25 years as a quiet witness to her version of events, some of her versions had become mine. I'd absorb them the way you absorb an accent, gradually, without choosing to, until you can't always hear where your own voice ends and the borrowed one begins. That unsettled me more than the distance between us ever did. I'd handed pieces of my own judgment over, a little at a time, every time I said okay to a story I hadn't lived through the way it was being told. I wasn't just Rima's alibi to other people. I'd become an alibi for my own doubts, telling myself that I trusted her completely, so I never had to sit with the harder truth, which was that some part of me had noticed something wrong for years and had chosen, every time, not to look. We still talk now. Not often. A message every few weeks, a birthday call, the kind of contact that keeps a door from fully closing without actually walking through it. I don't know if we'll find our way back to what we were. I've stopped trying to predict it. If anyone asks me now what happened between me and my oldest friend, I don't have a clean answer, and I've stopped looking for one. I don't tell people she's a liar. She isn't, not in any simple way, and the years when I said nothing made me part of whatever she is. I don't tell people I'm the wronged party. What I tell people when they ask is the truest thing I have, that for 25 years, I confirmed a version of her life that made things easier for everyone but me, and one Thursday evening I decided I couldn't keep doing it. And I said so. It doesn't feel as if she has forgiven me for that. Not fully, not yet. I'm not sure I've fully forgiven myself for all the years before it. The times I could have asked a question and didn't. The times I could have said, I need to know what I'm agreeing to, and instead just said, okay. I was so afraid of being difficult that I became invisible, and it took a phone call about a pair of reading glasses to make me see it. Months later, I stood on the Rawal town platform again. Same bench, same timetable board with the peeling corner, same 6:40 listed on the departures. I bought one coffee instead of two. When the train arrived, I got on without inventing an answer about where our friendship was going. For once, not knowing did not feel like something I had to fix.